I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which I speak, the Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. Knowing that this event is being watched across Australia, I also acknowledge the traditional owners of all the lands on which people are watching this. Welcome to this very special ZFA conversation celebrating International Women's Day, which falls tomorrow, the 8th of March. And as you saw before, we're joined by participants from across Australia, Israel, England, and South Africa. And thanks again to Haya and to Steve and the federations from the UK and South Africa for partnering with us tonight. I also welcome Josh Burns, MP, the federal member for McNamara, who's also with us tonight. I'm especially delighted to welcome our special guest, Merav Michaeli MK, to our conversation. There's no one better qualified to speak about women in leadership and how that plays out in Israel today than Merav. She's the chair of the Israeli Labour Party. She's been a Knesset member since 2013, a former journalist, TV anchor and radio broadcaster, and an activist on so many social issues. Merav, thank you so much for making the time to be with us in this very busy pre-election time. Merav is in conversation tonight with the ZFA's information chair, Adele Stolinna. I'm looking forward to what is going to be a fascinating and thought-provoking and maybe even provocative chat. If you'd like to pose questions, please use the Q&A function on Zoom. And if you'd like to ask questions that others ask, just use the thumbs up function that'll pop up in the Q&A box. Without further ado, Adele, Merav, welcome. And Adele, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeanette. And hi, Merav, and welcome back to Australia. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much for having me, at least virtually in Australia. Yes. Not.
Go on.
No.
So I wanted to ask you, because we're so close to International Women's Day, and the theme is about leadership in crisis. You've definitely chosen a very exciting time to be leading the Labour Party. So I wanted to ask, to start by asking you, and obviously all of our countries, and particularly Israel, face all manner of crises. So you can interpret whichever number of crises that the country might be facing in whatever way you want to. But I'm interested in specifically what motivated you to take on the leadership of the Labour Party right now.
Wow. I think maybe the thing that all our crises have together, and we do have a good number of them, is that with different leadership, it could have been much less worse. And some of those crises would have been maybe prevented to begin with. And some of them would certainly have been managed better. And I think the damage caused to citizens, to people, would have been smaller and less. And so the crisis of leadership really has to do with all the rest. And what happens in Israel today is that the crisis of leadership is so deep that we came to the point where we have only one governmental party. And that is yet another thing that really jeopardizes Israeli democracy. We came to the point where Netanyahu's party, the Likud, is the only ruling party in Israel, and all the rest are like fractions of lists, not even parties, that have no democratic processes within them, lists that were made by people who decided that they want to run, and they just made their own list of people to run with them to the Knesset, and without even any specific ideology or set of values or vision. And unfortunately, labor that was in a huge, overwhelming, ongoing crisis came to the point where it almost vanished. And labor was the other government and ruling party in Israel. This was the center-left, liberal, social democrat party that used to be in power for many, many years. And then, of course, for the Yitzhak Rabin years. And ever since his assassination, and actually ever since the incitement campaign waged by Netanyahu in '93, Labor and the center-left political camp in Israel has been crushing consecutively, I would say, constantly. I wouldn't even say slowly. It wasn't slowly. It was in different stages, but it's been really losing all of its power. And my understanding was that if we want to get Israel back on the path towards the Zionist vision, the Zionist dream, the Zionist miracle that happened here, this is, first of all, this is a must. It's a necessity for the sustainability of Israel, because Israel has strayed from this way so far away, really to the point where its future is unclear and uncertain. So it really has to go back to the idea of a home for the Jewish people, with equality for all, with a just society, with striving for peace as the #1 mean for both justice and security. And the only way to do this was to put labor back on its feet. Because we've seen that through all those years of crushing this camp, no other party took this role. There was no substitute for labor that rose from these ruins. Labor has to live up to its role in the Israeli, I would say, history, in Israel's existence. It has a role. It has to take back the role of the party that is the political arm of a movement that built this country. If we want Israel to remain the home of the Jewish people, with equality, with democracy, we need a ruling party that can make this happen. And this is why it was so important to me. This is why I stayed in labor. This is why I fought for it, even though everybody said to me, it's already dead, it's gone, it's impossible, it's not gonna work, you're not gonna make it. I felt that it's not dead yet. I mean, it might die, but it's not dead yet. And that the party has a calling. It needs to live up to this calling. It needs to really just stand up back on its feet and do what it needs to do. And this is why I took it on.
So I want to just kind of hang in the air a question about optimism and vision that I'll come back to later, because that's what I really heard from what you're talking about, is about having a particular vision of where you can see that you would like the country to go. But I wanted to first, I know we don't have a lot of time, and I think that there's some remarkable things about your running that actually you might say are in the fabric of the Labor Party, but actually I suspect, you know, any organisation is at the time made up of the people in it, and you're the one running it. So the Labor Party will become a fabric of you in some way. I want to acknowledge that your slate is woman, man, woman, man. In primary school here, we talk boy, girl, boy, girl. So that's what you've done. And certainly my children, when I explained to them, have a look at this, they said, obviously. Well, obviously, like they thought, why is that a radical thing? So, right. So in terms of women and men in leadership, I'm interested, you know, Golda Meir is obviously another Israeli, a Zionist woman who really comes to mind. But I think that many people, which might be unfair, but would say that her style of leadership was to almost become a man in a man's world, or to adapt to her context. And I'm wondering if you feel that there's space in politics today in Israel for a woman to play a woman's role in a multi-gendered world.
First of all, I have to tell you, I resent the way Golda Meir's memory is forged, because, you know, Golda Meir is the person that Israeli women need to thank for maternity leave, that Israeli public need to thank for an annual leave, for the laws, really the labor laws, the progressive liberal labor laws. She actually is the person, she really single-handedly fought for having social security in Israel. If it wasn't for her, I don't know if we had it to begin, like, at all. She has so many rights, and as a woman, I know that she once it's a common mistake. She once said about herself that she's not a feminist, and the reason why she said it was not because it's amazing to think how everybody can look the other way from the fact that she was working for women's rights her whole life long, from like her early days as a politician, as an activist, as someone with a goal in life. But and she said she's not a feminist because she was an American, and she did not align herself with a specific feminist revolution that took part at a certain time, and it really kind of stuck to her. And I feel that, you know, the discrimination against women did not stop there and then when she was prime minister and had to deal with the hardships of being a woman in this system, but actually goes on and on, forging her memory. It's not our interest as women to continue and portray her as someone who was not feminine enough or feminist enough, the other way around completely. Now, in Israel today, if you look at, like, I think Golda was the end of an era in which it was the beginning of Israel, and women did have some windows to be effective. By the way, they are, of course, absent from the historic writing about it. But then we had, I think, about 2 decades of women really falling back into the place of the traditional roles of women, allowing them to be mostly mothers and housemakers and homemakers, whatever. And then in mid-90s, we had really a feminist awakening, which I have had the privilege of being a major part of. And in the last 5 or something years, we're experiencing again a huge backlash. That is due to the fact that very right-wing religious forces have really acquired huge political power in the system and are using it a lot through women. The demand to exclude women, to separate men and women, to deny women from management or leadership roles in the army and in other places, putting religious men's right to ask and get a women-free environment, if it be it in the army or in other places. So I think it's not surprising that at the end of such 5 years, I am the only woman heading a party when we have at least 10 or 12 others running in this election. And none of that, it's not only is it the only egalitarian list that is running to parliament, it's also the only one headed by a woman. Thankfully, a very feminist woman, but still to me, it's like amazing when your kid asks you what's worth mentioning about it. So the fact that it's like only me is like, it blows your mind on one hand, and on the other hand, it really reflects a problematic point where women in Israel are. And at the same time, you see, and maybe because of that, how so many women respond to that with incredible enthusiasm, that, you know, they get someone that they believe and that they feel that actually represents them and really cares and sees women's rights, women's interests as a major priority. And we all need to remember that it's amazing to think, but women's interests are so often and mostly are also the interests of their children and their spouses and other people in their families, in their communities. So again and again, you realize that it's unbelievable that they're so neglected and so unattended to, and so under any kind of dispute at all. But hopefully we're going to be able to change that soon enough, because if, I mean, you mentioned the list, and certainly the list is the thing itself, and it's also symbolic for me. But what I'm calling our updated vision in labor now is that it's a feminist social democrat party, because I think there's a much needed feminist twist to social democracy. So it widens itself to shrinking the gaps where household works and child bringing are not acknowledged and not paid for in whatever ways. So this is part of the vision that we are really widening social democracy to take care of in labor now.
So, again, so many questions about that, but I'm interested. You talked about the right-wing religious forces. So I think in terms of the timing of this particular conversation, it's really noticeable in terms of the slate that you've got, the list that you've got, that Gilad Kariv is on it. And it's also noticeable in terms of the Supreme Court decision recognising progressive conversion that takes place in Israel, and that only happened this week. There's lots of different things happening in a similar time. And I just wondered whether you can talk a little bit about, I guess, about the timing of that, and also about how you feel and Labor's view, I guess, right now of that Supreme Court decision.
Well, first and foremost, we are privileged to have Gilad Kariv, one of the people, one of the prominent people who made that petition to the Supreme Court to begin with, number 4 on the list. Gilad has been a member of Labor for many, many years. And personally, also, I have been working with the reform movement in Israel and with Women of the Wall and with many, many pluralist Jewish movements for really many, many years. And it's like high time. It's something that is long overdue. It should have been decided so long ago, and should not have been decided, by the way, by the Supreme Court. It should have been decided by the government and by the Knesset, by Parliament. The only reason why the Supreme Court had to eventually make this decision is because they wouldn't, which is one of the tactics that the right is using so often to avoid making the decisions that are necessary and that are right and that there's no way not to make, forcing people to go to the Supreme Court, forcing the Supreme Court to make the decision that there's no other way but to make, and then to accuse the Supreme Court of interfering with state affairs and with authorities that belong to other parts of our authorities. So this is really, it's a very known and very common pattern that they're using in order to delegitimize, unfortunately, the court and all the causes that the court has to find itself defend. If you think about it, the gay community in Israel is known to be, it's thriving, it enjoys a lot of freedom relatively, but all of its freedom comes only from rulings of the Supreme Court. None of them are legislated. It's impossible to legislate it because for so many years of right-wing governments giving a veto for on everything that has to do with Judaism and state and religion issues and the personal status issue, giving this veto to not only ultra-Orthodox, but Orthodox, such as Naftali Bennett and others, who managed to continue denying people from basic human equality, from basic civil rights. This is something, when I was speaking about how Israel needs to go back to the path of Zionism, this is what I was, among other things, talking about. It's just impossible to continue this, division. The government and the parliament are denying people from basic civil rights and then bashing the court for giving it to them. So the same goes again for recognizing all of the Jewish different streams. Really, it's close to a tragedy that the only country on the planet that does not recognize all Jews equally is the state of the Jewish people, Israel. Instead of Israel becoming the place where Judaism is flourishing and reinventing itself constantly, it became the place where Judaism is stuck more than anywhere and any time in history. And it became politics. Instead of being the inspiration, the culture, the faith, the whatever it is to anyone, it became politics. It became corrupt, too often corrupt. This is a tragedy, and this is one of the ties that we should really, one of the knots that we should untie again. And this ruling of the Supreme Court is certainly a first important step on the way to changing the state of, it's not even religion and state, it's halacha and state in Israel. We need to go back to realizing that faith is something very personal and very private. And there's no way in the world that the state can impose on you how you behave according to someone else's beliefs.
So can I ask you a last question, and then we'll go to the UK and South Africa? And I think I want to know from you, what you're talking about is very much personal beliefs, I'd say. You seem to have an imperative to be in your role, not for the sake of that you've always wanted to be a politician. We know that you weren't a politician before. You talk a lot about, well, this is politics, but actually the way you conduct yourself appears to be not in politics. It appears to be you say something you believe in and then you proceed and go and do it. And that I mean, sometimes many people are saying that that's refreshing. So just briefly, I just wanted to ask you if you feel like there's a cost to that decision to say what you believe so freely and then go and do exactly as you believe. Is there a cost to that in terms of leadership or your life?
First of all, it's a big compliment. So thank you so very much. I'll take this this phrasing with me. It's very heartening. Is there a cost to it? First of all, I don't think it's not even a choice. It's like what I did and what I'm doing. And then when I'm asked constantly about it, and I was asked about it even prior to my political career. So I'm only 8 years in politics, and I was asked that when I was even just a celebrity, but an activist, which I was doing for 20 or 20 something years before I came to the formal politics. And my answer is always that I guess there is a cost, but the gain is so much bigger, And in our human nature is such that we see very much the cost usually, because it's sometimes it's immediate and it's harsh, and also because we are always afraid of change. So we see the cost, but we are not accountable between us. I mean, among ourselves. First of all, it's harder to see the gain because sometimes it's further away, but you need to remember this huge gain, the gain in succeeding to achieve what you believe in and the change that you want to derive, a huge gain in living peacefully with yourself and the satisfaction that you're actually doing what you want and what you believe in is a huge thing. And thirdly, I would say we never think about the cost the cost there is for not doing what you want to do, for not making the change that you want to change. That cost is much more under the radar, but it is huge. It's a constant erosion, both personally and socially. This is a cost that is very, very, very dangerous to bear. So I urge you not to.
Thank you. Steve Winston, Executive Director of Zionist Federation UK. I think you had a question for Merav.
Yes, I do indeed. So Merav, thank you first of all for speaking to us all. It's been very insightful, and it's very inspirational as well. And obviously, you've raised some very important issues about some of the challenges facing Israeli society today. And on behalf of the ZF, we admire your stance, and we wish you b'hatzlacha for everything. So my question is very much more lighthearted. If you were going to host a dinner party and you could invite just 4 women, whether they be deceased, passed away, or still with us, who would you invite and why?
Wow. Well, once you've given me the option of a deceased, then the first name that comes to mind is my late grandmother, Bodio Kastner. She died when I was 7, and she was the love of my life, and she was gorgeous, and she was amazing. And so she's the first one I'd invite. Lovely. I hope it's okay, but
of course.
Once you've opened this, option, wow, there are plenty of women. I think, first of all, right now, there are many women leaders who are doing amazingly well, specifically with COVID and otherwise. You see a model, a form of leadership that is inspiring. I look at it and I'm like, it's amazing that they succeed in applying what we are all always talking about, something that is direct and is frank and really connects with their people, and they get so much trust, and they manage to leverage it for the best of their society and their countries. So I would love to sit with them and hear from them how this works, even though unfortunately they're really doing it in very different environments than the Israeli environment. So certainly Prime Minister of New Zealand would be one of them. I hope to be able to do this very soon, by the way. We're working on maybe connecting with her for a conversation or something. I think Oprah Winfrey is a person I have a lot to still learn from. I've been following her so many years. She's one of the only women on television anywhere that really gives women a model for being a television personality that gives you prospect. It's one of her major achievements, regardless of the issues that she, and of course Golda. After all, yes, certainly Golda.
Oh, I'm sure that would make for an extremely interesting evening. Lovely. Thank you very much. And it's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure hearing from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. That was a great question. Chaya, you also had a question representing Zionist Federation of South Africa. The most said sentence of 2020 is coming into 2021, but you are on mute, Chaya.
Thank you, Adele. And thank you, Knesset member Michaeli, for these insights into Israeli political dynamics and the Labour Party. You are an inspiration to me, and I'm sure many other women and not just women around the world. Ahead of International Women's Day this year, and advancing women's rights, but it is also a time for sober reflection on the state of female education, suffrage, and economic security across the world. And there is a lot still to be done. As a recognized champion of women's rights in Israel, how do you rate Israel in this regard, domestically, in its responsibility to its neighbors, and in relation to other countries? I was just wondering if you have any further ideas on what can be done to advance gender equality in Israel and around the world. Thank you.
Well, in Israel, it's easy. We have to replace this government with a labor government. It's easy. It'll take some time, but not too long, I hope, because we're rebuilding the party to go back to being a party that challenges the government and then becoming one. So it's in terms of what to do, we all know, I mean, you mentioned the issues, and we all know what the solutions for these issues are because of so many years of feminist research in all those issues. So the policy agendas are there, even though they're partial. And really one of my goals, and if any of you wants to help with that, is to start a research institute, a feminist research institute here in Israel that will design policies for instance, to think about how to acknowledge how the state will best acknowledge the financial and economic worth of household works and child bringing. This is something that we haven't figured out globally yet. And this is a key issue to continue with advancing women's equality. When you think about globally, how do you advance women's equality? It's amazing to see how, I know that the UN, we have CEDAW, we have other initiatives in the UN. Did I say EU? I meant UN. In the UN, there needs to be a much more aggressive, active initiative to both encourage and not only encourage countries to take actual steps for women's equality. Because generally speaking, this is not something that the UN will, or the UN Security Council will have resolutions on, if specifically speaking. I'm not talking about 1325, which was a sort of a recommendation. I'm talking about resolutions that say to specific countries, you should do this and you should do that about the women's status in your country. I think this is something that we should work towards because it's the only way, I think, right now, how the international community can actually take responsibility for really lifting women in places where they really need the support.
Thank you. Well, at least from the South African Zionist Federation, and I'm sure I speak for many elsewhere as well, we are here to offer any support we can in these very important initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Merav, just a couple more questions. I wanted to find out about the role of the diaspora because you've taken time, you're clearly really busy to speak to 3 different diaspora communities here. And I just wanted to hear from you in terms of the extended family that the Jewish community around the world is. A lot of us here are not voters. We can't vote in an election, many people are. What do you feel like is the role of the diaspora in relation to the things that you've been talking about that can bring about the vision of Israel that you've been talking about?
That is really easy. It's the most important thing is not to give up on Israel. We've seen how liberal and progressive Jewish forces in the diaspora are, after so many years of Netanyahu and so many years of policies that go against their very deep beliefs and standing in the world, tend to give up on Israel and think that Netanyahu is Israel. And that it's doomed or whatever, or at least that they don't want to have anything to do with it anymore, because it's just shifted too far away from where they stand. And I urge you not to do that. That is the most important thing. The majority of Israelis do not subscribe to the racist, to the nationalists, the ultra-nationalists, I would say, to the populism that is ruling Israel for too long now. The majority of Israelis do believe in equality, civil equality, gender equality. They do believe in pluralism. They strongly adopt, the variety that we have both in Judaism and out and around it, and for people in general. So we very much need your support and your partnership in order to be able to take Israel back to the Zionist vision. I'm repeating it. I know I've said it twice before, but this really is what we need to do in order to take it back to what it was supposed to be, what it is supposed to be, what it can be. There's huge potential in Israel, huge potential. So much creativity and warmth and so much good that awaits a framework where it can actually become Israel. So don't give up on us. En contraire, we need you with us, and let's do this together.
Thank you. And I think actually that message will be really powerful for a lot of people. A lot of people have been worried about that and expressed that exact worry. So I think it'll be a really powerful message. I wanted to know, you talked about pluralism, and I think pluralism is a really fascinating topic because there's lots of different ways to look at pluralism, and some ways is everyone being their best, and as young people might say, you be you and I'll be me. But there's also pluralism where people, maybe for the sake of a higher goal or something bigger, maybe do give up something in order that other people would have space, or in order to believe, in something bigger. And I just wondered, compromise in Israel can be seen in so many different ways, whether it's about borders or about use of land or about relationship with religion or gender. So I just wondered, from you have a really clear vision. What happens when you have a really clear vision? What happens to compromise? Where is the space of compromise? How easy is it? Do you believe in it? How is it to negotiate when you have a clear vision?
My vision is to really structure Israel in a way that allows the maximum of everyone, being you or me or they or he or she or whatever. So this is what I need. I believe that we should just, structure and form things in a way that really allows each and every individual to maximally bring their humanity, okay, to fulfill, to exhaust your abilities, your wishes, your dreams, your qualifications. This is what for me, this is the role of the state, to legislate everything so it brings out the best in people and not the worst, because this, and I don't think we are aware of the extent to which the structure and the law really does bring out the best or the worst in people. And right now in Israel, it's certainly not the best. It's certainly not done, anywhere close to what it should and can be. Compromise is something that you do every morning. I mean, you get up in the morning, you don't have to be a politician in order to have to compromise about whatever. You are doing the best that you can. And you're doing what you think is, at a certain circumstance, the number one thing that will get you closer to your vision. And it's not always clear what it is. It's not even, sometimes it wouldn't even be what you thought it would be. But it's a calculation that each and every one of us does every day on I don't know, an hourly basis or something. So this is what I try to do in politics as well. Just, you know, as long as you have your vision clear enough, then the decisions sometimes may be frustrating, sometimes may be disappointing, sometimes often the options are really not fun, but you're working with what it is that you have and working in order to change even the circumstances. So your choices become easier and you are getting closer to your goal and your vision.
Thank you, Merav. On that really inspiring note, definitely I'll wake up more inspired in the morning, also thinking about the compromises I might have to make in my day. I wanted to introduce you to Josh Burns, MP, a member of Labor, who's going to do our vote of thanks. Thank you, Josh.
Thanks, Adele. Can you hear me okay, everyone? You can hear me okay?
Loud and clear. Very
good, very good. Well, good evening, everyone. Good morning, wherever you're joining. Merav, it's nice to see you again, my friend. It's we haven't spoken since you became the leader of the Labor Party, and so I just want to personally say congratulations. I'll come back to that in a second, but I think over the last year or so around the world, we've seen a politics that has been more about populism and not about thoughtfulness and about sincerity and about a caliber of person that really represents the best in us. And whenever I hear Merav talk, she reminds me of a far more sensible and familiar politics that is about thoughtfulness and is about trying to do better and not about trying to appeal to the best or the worst in us, but rather to put forward a vision and ideal. And to hear when we were watching very closely, Merav, the leadership battle or the leadership contest of the Labor Party, and we down here, I have to say, in the Labor ranks, we were very pleased to see you be emphatically endorsed as the leader. And I think as a Labor person, if I can be so indulgent and say that, I think you represent what the Israeli Labor Party and what Labor movements around the world should be aspiring for. And it was maybe after a few years in the wilderness, we can get back to ourselves and be true to ourselves. And I think, Merav, you present the best opportunity we've had in a very long time to do that over in Israel. And elections are very busy, but I really do wish you only success and from strength to strength, my friend, and good luck. And wow. And congratulations again on being the leader. And I'll leave you with this. The last time Merav was in Australia, we were actually going through the marriage equality debate in Australia. Merav will remember that she went on Q&A and was picking on Australian senators while they were arguing for more of the status quo. Merav was talking about how women need to cannot be used as objects of men, that women need to that is not up to men to determine what is in the interest of women, that is a world gone by. And I think in Australia, and it's been a rough few weeks in politics. All the Australians online will know about that. We are about to celebrate International Women's Day, and may there be more voices like Merav in politics, both in Australia and around the world. So good luck, my friend. Nice to see you, and thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Thank you so much for this. This was moving and heartening. Thank you so much.
Come back soon, Merav. In the meantime, we'll let you go and do your job. So thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And thank you, everybody, for your participation and your attention this evening. We're sorry there were many questions that we didn't get through, questions posed on chat, and it was almost inevitable that we wouldn't be able to get to all the questions and comments, because this is a conversation that could have and still should go on for much, much longer in different forums. So this is International Women's Day. It's Erev International Women's Day now, tomorrow. Have these conversations around your workplaces. If you're working, if you're out of Victoria, have it in your families, have it in your communities. These are really important issues to discuss, issues of principle, issues of vision. Tonight's session was recorded and the video will appear very soon on the Zionist Federation of Australia's YouTube channel. So you can review it, you can send it to your friends. And of course, please, we encourage you to comment in the comments section there and continue the conversation online there. Once again, thank you very much to Chaya, to Steve, to the Zionist Federations of the UK and South Africa. We've enjoyed having your partnership here tonight, and we hope we'll be able to do it again really soon. As I mentioned at the beginning of the session, our next ZFA conversation will be a post-election analysis with former Israeli ambassador to Australia, Mark Sofer, and Jerusalem Post journalist and commentator Lahav Harkov. We're expecting a frank and candid view from two people with different areas of expertise and probably different perspectives. So please join us on Zoom at 8 p.m. Australian Eastern Time on Wednesday, 31st of March. It's in the middle of Pesach. Details will be coming out to all of you and to our databases. Please share them in the next day or so. Please, everybody, I hope you all celebrate or mark International Women's Day in a meaningful way tomorrow. In the meantime, good night, Laila Tov, and we'll see you next time. Bye.